Most married people with IRAs name their spouses as beneficiaries to receive any remaining balance in the account when they pass away. So what's the tax treatment if you inherit your spouse's IRA? You have choices, and what you choose will depend on your circumstances and financial goals. I'm the Tax Geek, and here are inherited IRAs for spouses oversimplified. Before we get started, it would be a good idea to watch this video on required minimum distributions if you haven't already done so. A card taking you to the video should appear just about now. It might also be helpful to watch some of my other videos on retirement income, and a playlist containing them will appear on the end screen. There will also be links to these videos in the video description. First, some assumptions. I'm going to limit the presentation to traditional IRAs, and we're also going to assume the IRA has no basis, that is, prior non-deductible contributions. We also need to assume that the surviving spouse is the only beneficiary. This will keep the video fairly straightforward and cover most of the common situations that you might face if you find yourself the beneficiary of your spouse's IRA. Throughout this video, I'm going to refer to two people: the owner, who is the original owner of the account and whom I will also refer to as the decedent or decedent spouse, and the beneficiary or spousal beneficiary, who is the spouse that is named the beneficiary of the account upon the owner's death. When I refer to tables 1, 2, or 3, I am referring to the life expectancy factor tables that are found in Appendix B of IRS Publication 590B. These life expectancy factors are used to calculate any required minimum distributions. There are two sets of rules covering inherited IRAs depending upon when the owner died. The Secure Act of 2019 changed the IRA inheritance rules effective January 1, 2021. The rules regarding IRA spousal beneficiaries did not change significantly with regard to this new law. So let's get started. Surviving spouses have three choices when they inherit their spouse's IRA. They can assume ownership of the IRA and treat it as their own. They can roll the IRA over into their own IRA, or they can remain the beneficiary of the IRA. If the surviving spouse treats the IRA as their own or rolls it over into their own IRA, required minimum distributions don't start until the surviving spouse turns 72, even if the decedent spouse is already receiving RMDs. The surviving spouse uses Table 3 to determine the amount of the RMDs when they are required to take them. The surviving spouse bases any RMDs on his or her own life expectancy. If the surviving spouse remains the beneficiary of the IRA and the decedent spouse is already required to take RMDs, the surviving spouse must continue to take RMDs even if he or she is not yet old enough to take them. In this case, the surviving spouse uses Table 1 to determine the amount of the RMDs using his or her own age. If the decedent spouse is not yet required to take RMDs and the surviving spouse is remaining the beneficiary of the IRA, RMDs need to begin when the decedent spouse would have been required to take them. Again, the surviving spouse uses Table 1 to determine the amount of the RMDs using his or her own age. So what is the best option for a surviving spouse? Like just about everything where taxes are involved, it depends. The following examples show that it's not always cut and dried. Here's Richard and Lucille. Lucille had already been taking RMDs from her IRA when she died at age 75. Richard was 67 at the time of her death. If Richard assumes ownership of the IRA or rolls it into his existing IRA, he wouldn't have to start taking RMDs out of the IRA for 5 years until he himself turns 72. He would use Table 3 and base the RMDs on his age, not hers. If Richard instead chooses to remain the beneficiary of the IRA, he would have to start taking RMDs starting in the year after his wife's death. In this situation, he would use Table 1 and base the RMDs on his age, not Lucille's. Now we'll look at Phyllis and Lawrence. Lawrence met an untimely death at age 63 when Phyllis was just 56, having named her as his beneficiary of his IRA. If Phyllis treats the IRA as her own, she could wait 16 years before having to take RMDs, basing the payments on her age using Table 3. If she remains the beneficiary of the IRA, she would have to start taking RMDs after just 9 years, when Lawrence would have had to start taking them. Despite the advantage in being able to take RMDs later, Phyllis might just want to remain the beneficiary of the IRA at least while she is under age 59 and a half. If she remains the beneficiary, she could withdraw funds from the IRA and avoid any 10% early withdrawal penalty. Once Phyllis turned 59 and a half, she could take ownership of the IRA and delay the required minimum distributions. And finally, let's look at Dorothy and Stanley. Dorothy was 76 when Stanley passed away at the age of 68. If Dorothy assumes ownership of Stanley's IRA, she would have to start taking RMDs in the year after Stanley's death. The RMDs would be based on Table 3, using her own life expectancy. If Dorothy remained a beneficiary of the IRA, she could actually delay the RMDs until Stanley would have reached age 72 and base them on her own age using Table 1. In every one of these cases where the decedent spouse had already been receiving RMDs, an RMD would have to be taken in the year of the spouse's death, using either Table 2 or 3 based on the decedent spouse's life expectancy. So that's the twisty and turny road of inheriting a spouse's IRA. This video was not an exhaustive view of all possible options, and the best thing to do if you're in this situation is to consult with a trusted investment advisor. You can find more detail on this topic and additional resources linked in the video description. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone who would find it useful. Subscribing to the channel and tapping the bell puts you first in line for new Tax Geek videos. And of course, your questions, comments, and suggestions are always welcome in the comment space below. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with more of your taxes oversimplified.